The Blast from Our Past Network.
Podcasting After Dark presents TV Obscura, a deep dive into underrated and unknown television shows from our youth. Cartoons, sitcoms, cop shows, and much more. Sit back and enjoy some nostalgic fun with TV Obscura.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the annual Halloween episode of Podcasting After Dark presents TV Obscura. I am 1/3 of the TV Obscura team, Corey, a.k.a. Sleazy C. Joined with me, as always, are my two brothers from other mothers, Zach, the Total Snackhead Schaefer, and Diallo, the Armageddon Jackson. And this year, we are diving into, love them or hate them, we are diving into Friday the 13th, the series, and Freddy's Nightmares. Now, it's taken us a few years to actually get to these, but I think that that's kind of appropriate, given sort of my experience with it and everything like that. But before we jump all into to the mix here tonight, Diallo, it's been a while, buddy, since we've had you back on TV Obscura, but really happy to have you back and the full team here, like Voltron, for the Halloween episode.
Like Voltron, that's great. I love it.
Which line are you, Diallo?
I was actually gonna say something controversial. I was gonna ask, are we the lions or the cars?
You know what? I kind of liked the
deep
cars when I was a
cut.
kid. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
lie.
I do. Like, it is a very divisive subject. Like, people they hate the cars, and I don't get it. But my brain has never really been a either or type of person. I'm like, I loved Marvel, I love DC. I just I just read whatever I did. So I saw the Lions. The Lions definitely are better. Don't get me wrong. But the cars are cool too.
I think I don't remember any characters from the car show. I remember much more of the characters and everything from the Lions.
Yeah. Well, because the cars, it was like there were 15 of them, and
Yeah,
they
there
only
were a
really
lot.
focused on the main guy, Jeff, and a couple others, and it wasn't as story focused because it had a lot more characters.
Yeah.
But the Voltron itself looked cool. Like, it looked like the samurai, and it was kind of heavy, and the way he made his sword I thought was cool. I thought it was a little cooler than the Lions.
Agreed.
But the Lions were amazing.
I think we're going to have to tackle the non-lion Voltron on TV Obscura one of these days, because I do want to revisit that, because I remember loving it. Diallo, you didn't answer my question.
I know, I didn't.
So, we'll table that for the TV Obscura discussion.
It's
in the
been a
future.
while. I haven't been back. I just had to get everything out. I'm sorry.
I know. Zach, it's good to see you, buddy, as always.
As always, we've been recording nonstop, so I feel like I saw you yesterday or the day before, and I'm so happy that we are finally digging into these series. I think it's interesting that you said love them or hate them, and we're going in order of Friday the 13th, then Freddy's Nightmares. I don't know if there's a connection there. We'll just find out when we have a general discussion, whether we love them or hate them. But man, oh man, I'm so stoked to get to the Halloween of TV Obscura. It's been a while.
So guys and gals, if you this is my personal experience with these two shows. We talked in the past about shows like Werewolf and Werewolf and and War of the Worlds. Guys, it's over. I'm done.
Hey, everybody from Michigan.
And specifically, like Monsters. These were all the shows that I grew up with as a kid.
Tales from the Dark
Tales
Side.
from the Dark Side, too. I absolutely remember both of these shows, Friday the 13th, the series, and Freddy's Nightmares. And I can tell you, I did not watch too many of them, or I didn't watch it too often. My experience, like when I think back about it now, I seem to kind of fall into the zeitgeist like everybody else, where I was like, I didn't want to like Friday the 13th because Jason was in it, and I think I liked Freddy's Nightmares better. But then you hear people talk about it now, and they're like, no, Friday the 13th was actually better, and Freddy's Nightmares kind of sucked. And I mean, that might actually be pretty accurate. We'll obviously get into the nitty gritty of that in a little bit, but that is to say that I wanted to revisit both of these together because I feel like they're always in the same conversation together. When people talk about one or the other, they always bring the other one up as sort of a counterbalance point to it. And I wanted to kind of put it to rest as to which one I think is better. So yeah, I remember watching them as kids, both shows, but not really caring too much about either. Diallo, what is your experience with both of these shows combined or separately?
Yeah, I watched both of them when they were on. I was in high school at the time, and that it was sort of like, for me, that was like prime horror, like existence. I actually forgot about it till I started watching the Freddy's Nightmare, and I forgot how much I was into Freddy Krueger when I was like, I used to dress up like him. I had like a glove with like clothespins that I put on the tips for the claws.
Wow.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, for like Halloween.
For like non-hurt, so you don't hurt anybody, but it still looks like it.
Yeah, I think I spray painted them silver or whatever. And
great idea.
Yeah, I had the hat. I had this sweater that I would wear, and I would just like, that was the thing for a while. Like not even
DIY
not even that's hilarious.
That's good.
Not even like Halloween. Like I forgot how into that I was.
Let's hear your Freddy voice. What's your Freddy voice?
I would draw it all the time. It's actually funny. As I was watching it, I was like, yeah, I used to do a Freddy voice, but I never attempted to bring it back. And I don't.
Come on.
I can't even remember like a line to say.
Do it. How about what did he say? What's he say? I love screamers.
Oh, I love screamers.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a little too deep. But anyways, yeah, I really loved when we were talking about this show, I remember sending I forgot about I must have blocked out a lot of stuff from high school. Because I all of a sudden I remembered that they had the Freddy's Greatest Hits album, and it was he was doing all these like old 50s and 60s like songs with it's Freddy. Yeah. And so I was sending it to you guys, and I used to listen. My friend had the CD or tape or whatever, and I would listen to that. Loved the movies, but I also, I don't know if we're really getting into it, but I remember the show wasn't like I felt like it should have been, like kind of what they were average, and now I'm like, oh, it was like a money grab. So it definitely wasn't like as satisfying as I would have liked it to have been. But, I watched it. I can't really remember any episodes. I kind of remembered the pilot. That was about it. And then as I was watching another episode and saw the opening, I realized I was really just remembering the opening sequence where he was burning. I thought that was in some episode or something. But then Friday the 13th as well, obviously, I mean, in a way that one was even more disappointing, but like, I think I watched that one longer. And we'll talk about it a little bit more, but, I actually did like that show. Like it felt disappointing, I think, like you said at first, but like it actually was kind of interesting and engaging. And I think I watched it up to a certain point, and as I was like reading more about it, I was like, oh, I kind of remember when something happened, and then I stopped watching it, and we could talk about that later. And also, I think I went away to college, and then I just didn't have access to TV anymore. But I was really into I really watched both of the shows, was really into Friday the 13th, the show, for at least when it first started, and the very fond memories, like Friday night I think was watching Freddy. I can't remember when Friday the 13th came on, but I remember watching that like at least over the weekend or something. Always talking about it with our friends and stuff. So some good times. And Roby was hot.
Yeah, yeah, buddy. And it should, I guess it is probably pertinent to the conversation. Diallo, you were talking about how much of a Freddy fan you are / were. I was always a Jason Voorhees kid. So I think, just the shock and disappointment of not having the Friday 13th series involve Camp Crystal Lake or Jason Voorhees was just so devastating to me that it was hard to get past. But as I was watching them, I remembered the characters and everything. So I think I probably saw more episodes than I probably remember. But still, I didn't watch it, either of them as frequently as I did War of the Worlds or Werewolf or Monsters specifically. That was my favorite. All right, Zach, what and then of course tell us, were you a Freddy kid, were you a Jason kid, like where did you lean, and then your experience with these two shows?
Well, you just triggered a memory in me, and I'll have to dig it up and pull it out to take pictures of it. I have these water squirter heads, and the one's a Freddy head
Yes,
and
and
one's a Jason head, and they come
those.
with victims. I still have those.
Oh my god, who put those out? Oh my god, I have so many questions. You
I
sparked a
don't
memory.
Well, we do have Why Does Zach Own This on our $2 late fee Patreon. Maybe we need to do Why Does Zach Own This as well on Podcasting After Dark, and I'll bring them out for that episode because I do still have them in my horror chest with a bunch of other horror related toys. And yeah, like little squeeze-ems. They come with just the head. These are kid toys, and they're marketing Freddy. I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum as with the R-rated shows that they try to make mainstream for kids. I was a Freddy guy and a Jason guy. I was like a little bit of both. I think I was more Freddy because Freddy was consistent across the board with his look versus Jason, who changed it up a little bit. The mask changed, obviously. The first one, he's not in it, blah, 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 blah. But at this stage, I think I lean more towards Friday the 13th because I just love horror in the woods. And Freddy was so much more comical and cartoonish as he went on and became more iconic. I mean, he hosted like MTV Friday Night Videos or whatever that was,
Yeah.
Your next video is Y&T. Summertime girls. I've had a few of them in the boiler pit. Crap like that. And shout out to Lee Germaini, by the way, because he has the vinyl of the Freddy album you were talking about, Diallo. Diallo was texting us songs like, you remember this song?
Down to the
and then
boiler
Lee's like,
room.
I have that album. But yeah, I was maybe 50-50, I guess, at the end of the day. And now I lean more towards Jason. But before we went on air, Diallo and I were trying to determine, because we both grew up in the Bay Area. These shows were syndicated. They were both maybe on TV 44 at the time. I remember specifically Friday the 13th being on TV 44. I just forget about Freddy's Nightmares. I'm not sure if that was TV 20.
Yeah,
TV 44.
I'm pretty sure Freddy's Nightmares was on TV 44. It's actually funny because I don't remember, like I said, I don't really remember what channel Friday the 13th came on or even what time it came on, but I mean, it almost would have had to have come on TV 4 because that was pretty much the only channel that was doing syndication on any level.
Right. I mean,
at that
KTVU
time.
Channel 2 was, but
Yeah,
that was when
by that time Fox,
came on.
yeah, in '87 Fox kind of took that over, so they weren't doing
Right.
like in the evenings they weren't doing anything during the like in that like 5 to 7 slot or whatever. They would have some syndicated shows, but for the most part it was like 44. 20 had like random shows on all the time. I don't,
Yeah. And they had their dance show. From
yeah,
the dance
yeah,
studios
dance
in
party.
TV20.
Yeah, dance party. Yeah.
And
I
it
just-
should be noted that both of these shows were straight to syndication.
Yeah.
They were, yeah. And I mean, I watched both of them. I was a latchkey kid, much like you, Corey. And my brother would go out at night, and I was home alone, and I would watch Friday the 13th, or we would watch it together. And I remember being thoroughly disappointed when Friday the 13th first came on, because I'm like, where's Jason? Where's Jason? Where's the camp? Where's the lake? Can we just get a lake at least? Come on, something. And then, of course, Freddy's
switch.
Such a bait and switch. But this is around the same time. I know Twilight Zone, the series, had come on prior to this, but it reminded me I think in my Mandela effect mind, I was like, oh, Friday the 13th was the series that was like, had no connection from one episode to another until I just recently rewatched it. And then my mind was blown or reminded. And then Freddy's Nightmares, I'm like, oh, that was the one that was connected for every episode. And then I realized, no, that's not necessarily the case necessarily. So I think, we'll obviously talk about how we feel about it now. But back then, I actually remember liking Friday the 13th, the series, when I started watching it. I really liked, obviously, Robbie, but I really liked her cousin as well, John D. LeMay, who played Ryan. I mean, I really liked that dude. There was something about the personality, the chemistry. I think I liked that it was Canadian, so it gave me a vibe of it was just different. It didn't feel like other run-of-the-mill shows. I don't know. We'll talk more about it. But back in the day, that's my familiarity. Watching it on whether it was Friday night or Saturday night. It had to be on a weekend. It had to be. It was definitely not on during the Monday through Thursday. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what we'll do is we'll break it up into two halves, essentially. We all watched 2 episodes from each show. So we'll kind of briefly discuss the episodes and then our thoughts in general about the shows themselves. But we are going to kick off with Friday the 13th, the series, only because it started a year earlier. It started in 1987, went to 1990, whereas Freddy's Nightmares was started in 1988 and went to 1990. And by the way, I was so shocked that Friday the 13th was 3 seasons. I was like, oh my God, I thought it was like 1. And then I was even doubly shocked that Freddy's Nightmares was 2 seasons, because I feel like I thought that was like 3 or 4 seasons or something.
Really? I thought it was only 1. I was surprised it went further.
Yeah.
Maybe it should have only been 1.
I mean, yeah, maybe.
Should have maybe just been 1 episode.
That's why I thought it was only 1 season.
Oofa, but hold on. Before we jump into any of that, we will just get into it. But when we talk about the cast I think Freddy's Nightmares wins when it comes to casting overall.
Oh yeah.
Maybe specifically the episode the episodes that we watched. Yeah.
Dong dong.
All right.
Everybody will understand what that means a little bit later.
They will.
Yeah, you will. Stay tuned.
Yeah, and I'll say which episodes we watched, and I'll give the numbers and everything. And as always, guys and gals, if you go on our Patreon page, I posted the links to these episodes. It can be each season can be found on archive.org. So
what the hell is that, by the way? Is that a new thing?
No,
archive.org?
it is. So Internet Archive, they basically have an archive of like all of these old web pages, and what I've discovered is that they've actually grabbed some of the files that were still on some of those old web pages. So you can grab, there's like books you can grab, sound, music. So that's where that came from. I've actually discovered that you could even do that because I was getting the director's commentary podcast for Battlestar Galactica. Then that's when I realized that even existed. So pretty good resource, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, every single episode from both the seasons, at least the first season, we didn't kind of look up past that, but every episode for each show for the first season is available.
Yeah, and really good quality.
Yeah.
So I think it was, I don't know if it was at some point it was on someone's an official site or something back in the early days of the internet when they would kind of do stuff like that before they figured out they needed to make money.
Yeah.
But anyways, hopefully it doesn't get pulled down after this.
I know. Yeah, right. I was gonna say, like, the formatting's really nice. The way the pages are set up.
Yeah.
I get annoyed at times with Daily Motion because things are a little hard to find.
Yeah.
archive it. I mean, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm definitely in.
And there's no
And-
ads. It's not like YouTube. There's no like ads anywhere. or
Right,
anything.
it's the video file. It just
Yeah,
plays,
just
and then
exists.
it's like a playlist. So when the next one's done, when the one you're watching's done, the next one starts, and
right.
yeah,
It'll be
it's,
gone by next week.
Yeah,
so,
probably.
you know.
But for now, guys and gals, I do have the links to both shows, and we will say which episodes we watched and everything, so you can go check that out. So, but let me give a little. I'm gonna have a little backstory, write up for both Friday 13th and Freddy's Nightmares. But right now, I'll just do the Friday 13th one. So, Friday 13th, the series, is a fantasy horror television series that ran from October 1987 to May of 1990 in syndication. The series was produced by Frank Mancuso Jr., who produced Friday the 13th Part 2 through Jason Takes Manhattan, and featured Roby as Micah Foster and John Day... What was it? John Day...
LeMay.
John DeLaMay.
And John D. LeMay as Ryan Dallion. They play two cousins who inherit an antique store. After they sell all the antiques, they learn that the items were cursed and have to track them down with the help of John Marshak, played by Chris Wiggins. The series was originally titled The 13th Hour, but Frank Mancuso Jr. instead took the name Friday the 13th to deliberately draw in audiences. Despite the title, the TV series has no story connections to the film series, and Jason Voorhees does not make an appearance. Friday the 13th, the series, was nominated for 2 Emmy Awards in '88 and '89 for visual and graphic effects, and in 1990, the series was nominated by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films as Best Series. So, Zach, can you talk to us a little bit about our 3 main leads in this show?
Yeah, and before we do that, I just want to also point out that Frank Mancuso Jr., he is a prolific producer. He produced the War of the Worlds TV series as well, by the way. He was the executive producer of that.
Okay, that makes sense.
And he's got a history of April Fool's Day.
Great movie.
Body Parts, Species, Fled, Hoodlum, Species 2,
Sure.
Ronin, Stigmata, Species 3.
Sure. He knows where his money comes from.
Right? So, anyways, I just think it's worth noting that Frank Mancuso Jr. he's a prolific producer and should get his due diligence and credit. The series starred the 3 that you mentioned. I'll just start with Chris Wiggins first, who plays Jack Marshak, you said. Mm-hmm. He's old school actor. He's done voiceover for a lot of stuff. He was in Rock and Rule, which if you've ever seen, it's kind of like Ralph Bakshi inspired. I think Ralph Bakshi might have actually done the animation for it. But he did a lot of Canadian stuff. Redwall, which I believe is a Canadian cartoon. Little Bear. Babar, B-A-B-A-R. 2 B's? No, 1. B-A-B-A-R. That's 2. I thought you meant together. So anyways, Pippi Longstocking, the TV series. Pippi Longstocking. Na, 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 na. You know that, right, Diallo?
Yeah,
That was a theme song.
I mean...
Yep.
Yeah,
You know.
I know.
You know. Earth Final Conflict he was in. 1 episode. But, Never Ending Story cartoon series, which was actually pretty darn good. It was on HBO, I believe, the cartoon series from 95 to 96. The Ace Ventura Pet Detective cartoon series he was featured on. Sailor Moon, 3 episodes. So, prolific actor, worth noting. But I'll save the best for last. John D. LeMay. I remember him mostly besides this from the same thing I'm sure Corey does. Corey, what do you remember John D. LeMay from?
Jason Goes to Hell, but also Tour of Duty. I weirdly watched a lot of Tour of Duty as a kid. But
Totally, yeah.
But Zach, were you gonna say totally agree?
Totally agree, but I was going to say when he popped up in Friday the 13th, Jason Goes to Hell, I was like, is this going to be a cool crossover that they had a perfect opportunity to bring the Ryan character into the universe?
And
no.
So I've seen...
No.
Wrong. Wrong.
Wrong.
I've seen fan theories talk about how like the character changes his name and everything and then becomes it is the same character. But you mentioned earlier that you always found him likable. I had the exact same experience with him. I really liked him in Jason Goes to Hell. I remember when I was watching this, I remember also kind of liking him probably as a kid too. But I really like him this go around. John De La May. He's a very likable guy, and I think he has good chemistry with Roby on screen.
I totally agree. For the totally agree, I need one more for the hat trick for our Canadian friends out there. New Kids. He was in New Kids, by the way, and we broke down New Kids. I think in our first season of Jason Goes to Hell of our show, Pad, and he was in Eddie Dodd, which rest in peace, Treat Williams. Eddie Dodd. One of us wanted to bring up Eddie Dodd. It might have been you, Diallo, or you brought up that John Ritter detective series that we'll bring to TV Obscura eventually.
Hooperman.
But Eddie Dodd is a show we need to bring to TV Obscura. It only lasted for like 1 or 2 episodes.
I have it on our list, our TV Obscura master list. I have Eddie Dodd on there. I didn't even know what it was. Just when you guys shot it out, and I was like, all right, on the list it goes.
On the list it goes. Well, on the list, a movie you might want to put on your list if you're a fan of Robbie is the movie Play Nice. Robbie, I'm going to get to her backstory in just a minute, but I really want to quickly say Play Nice is like a Fatal Attraction type skin flick.
Okay.
And Edo Ross, who plays the evil Russian in Red Heat, and this guy has like a very distinctive nose. He's like the love interest in that. So if you want to see Robbie making out with Edo Ross, that's your movie.
He was also, Edo Ross was in Universal Soldier, and I think he was in the Men in Black cartoon as one of the agents in the first season.
He was, and he's in a great, very underrated, will come to Pat eventually movie called The Hidden.
Yep.
He's got a huge part in that. I think he's on the poster of he's the main looking villain on the poster. Anyways, Louise Robbie, Canadian actress, but it's really her backstory, her personal life, that's more fascinating to me. In 1993, so she's had a pop star career. She did some pop music. I have not listened to her stuff, but I have a feeling if it's as good as Martika Toy Soldiers, then I'm sold. And I have a feeling it'll be something like that. Anyways, in 93, she began dating Charles Beauclerk, Earl of Bufford.
What?
Bufford. Direct descendant of King Charles II and his mistress, Nell Gwyn.
Wow.
The two met after Lord Burford gave a lecture about one of his relatives, the 17th Earl of Oxford. Oh my gosh, that must have been fascinating. Who is one of several authors named in the Shakespeare authorship question. I have no idea what that is. Anyways, they got married, and she had a kid, Baron of Hanworth. Their son, check this out. James Malcolm Aubrey de Vere Beauclerk.
My God.
Lord Vere, Baron of Hanworth. Robbie is 63 years old. She's still alive. What a story this person must have. They lived in Suffolk, and then they got divorced in 2001.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah. She was engaged to a guy named Stanley Schaefer, no relation, top fashion photographer in 2008, and he died in 2010.
Oh, no. Maybe she's a Black Widow now.
Why do I sound 68 when I'm laughing right now? Anyways, she covered One Night in Bangkok. I want to hear that song. We got to find that song. I'm sure it's on YouTube. And apparently she's in the process of creating a new album. And she had a song on the Money Pit soundtrack, Web of Desire, with the band White Lion.
Wow.
Once bitten, twice shy, babe.
Wow.
Anyways, I think she's fascinating. She didn't do much outside of that skin flick.
And this. I think
and
her,
this.
I think her
and
hair
was
was fascinating in this.
and Raw Deal and The Money Pit. By the way, Aaron Gilmer, I'm sure, has seen Play Nice. And if you've watched Cinemax at any time during the 90s, you too have probably seen Play Nice.
You too have seen Play
But
Nice.
yeah, that's the general cast, But then we go into like the first episode, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's a young Sarah Polley in that episode, and R.G. Armstrong from
Predator and the Car. We recovered the car on this show.
Anyway, Jill Hennessy from Law and Order shows up on from time to time on Friday the 13th, the series. Jill Hennessy, of course, from the first seasons of Law and Order.
Yeah. So real quick, I'll just kind of give a little quick synopsis of the 2 episodes we watched, and then I think I'm not going to try to keep the conversations to like a specific episode. Let's just have fun and jump between the 2 of them and everything. So we all watched season 1, episode 1, The Inheritance, which is really just sets up the entire thing. You see that their uncle has this like antique store that is, it's kind of Needful Things-esque, I guess. He looks like he maybe made a
before Needful Things, right?
Yeah, I think so. And he looks like he made some kind of a deal with the devil. Things go wrong, and he dies. He goes straight to hell, and literally
off to hell he goes.
Like someone. Never mind.
And then basically Mickey and Ryan inherit the place, and they kind of sell off all the stuff, and thus sets up this the theme of the show, which every episode they have to go track down a new piece that they sold off. So that's kind of the device, the hook of the show. And of course we can talk specifically about these episodes when we get into it. And then the second one we all watched was season 1, episode 11, The Scarecrow. And it was actually, I don't know what the cursed object really was in this one, but it was the Scarecrow hood, maybe.
That's a good question, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting that none of us actually knows.
Yeah.
But I did very much like this episode. And basically, they have to go to the countryside to, I think actually maybe it's even the Scarecrow itself is the cursed object.
Yeah.
Murders happen. They have to sort of get to the bottom of it. Mickey is in peril. This is sort of the formula. Mickey's in peril. She screams for Ryan as if he's her lover, but yet they're cousins. They sort of forget that sometimes. And they solve
kissing cousins.
Yeah, they fix it. They figure it out by the end of the episode, and then they move on to the next thing. But what I really liked about the Scarecrow episode, it felt very Halloween-y. Like it looked very like up by like maybe Wisconsin or something in Canada, but it looked like it was filmed in the fall, so all the leaves were off the trees and stuff. It looked cold. I loved it. So we'll get into all of that. But Diallo, open discussion at this point, my man. Where do you want to take us with these 2 episodes, or just Friday the 13th in general, the series?
I mean, so like I think I talked about it a little bit earlier, or I kind of jumped in when Zach was talking, but it very much felt like a bait and switch when that first introduction to it, because obviously Friday the 13th was high in the mind of every adolescent, at least boy, at the time. So,
and he knew that, hence why he changed the name to kind of actually literally grab that audience. Right,
and like I'm today's years old when I found that out, and and I was like, oh God, that's why. That's why. Another one thing that's interesting is there was a show on Sci-Fi called Warehouse 13 that I remember when it was on, and I remember going, this is just like that Friday the 13th show. And now I'm like, and it was called The 13th Hour, so it definitely was, quote unquote, stolen from that, Anyway, but yeah, watching it now, I always remember the theme song, the music, and how the show opened.
Me too.
And watching it now, especially versus like the Freddy one, like the quality, it looked like they actually had put money into it, and it was almost like one or two steps below the X-Files. In the first X-Files season, if you go back and watch the first X-Files season, it's not super high budget, but it definitely like X-Files is a little bit more refined from this. But it was like this show could have been on that level if it had come out maybe like a few years later on Fox, you know. But yeah, like it had a nice look to it, a nice feel. It was a little moody. The pilot, I mean, you know, I think as we go over a lot of these shows, the pilot isn't necessarily indicative of the mood of what the rest of the episodes are going to be. Little bit of it's a little interesting because the show's kind of like anthology like, but this one has more of the setup, so it's a little bit more grounded than you normally would get in later episodes with like the spooky. But when it gets to the spooky, it's pretty spooky. Yeah. So yeah, like the doll was like, I mean, like classic doll storytelling. It was
very Annabelle-esque, and we should say the sort of the you know, even though there's a bunch of cursed objects that get let loose in the first episode, they focus on one, which is this doll that like a 10-year-old Sarah Polly gets, and it's very Annabelle-esque. You know, you can totally. I mean, because the real Annabelle story existed before this show, so I wouldn't be surprised if they sort of tuned in on that for this. But then I also see maybe some, you know, inspiration from the movie Annabelle. You know, the people who wrote Annabelle the movie saw this back in the day. They did. Yeah, and I think there was some inspiration there.
Yeah. So it was. I mean, like I was finding myself enjoying it a lot, and as I often do with watching a lot of these shows, I started to envision like I could see the pieces that could have been boosted or changed. Like part of why it fails is because of the time that it was in, where the storytelling wasn't quite on point to get it to. So it was, as they were setting things up, it was like some things were a little too easy. Shows weren't really into doing story arcs, so it was interesting that they were doing a version of that here. But since everything was geared towards kind of like being able to watch it out of order, you could do that. I do remember I remember I stopped watching it, and I don't remember precisely why. And as I was reading about it, I remember something made me mad. And then as I was looking at like the history of the show, I realized that Ryan was like killed off or jettisoned from the show in season 3. And I think that's when I stopped watching it. It's like when he was gone, it just kind of like changed, because I felt like there was like the relationship between him and Mickey was like central to the show, and there was like they were getting closer and closer, and then he was gone, and it just kind of lost me after that.
You mean the whole will they won't they cousin thing?
Yeah, apparently they were making it very clear in everything I read that they were like cousins by marriage.
Oh, yes. Yeah. To kind of cover up the freaking sizzling chemistry that they have together.
Yeah, dude, when she first walks in, he's checking her out. I'm like, dude.
And then she tells him that she's his cousin, and he still is like checking her out.
Yeah.
And then in the second episode, when you kind of find out he had a brother, you know, that died when he was young.
Yeah.
And it's like, how did she not hear about her cousin that died, you know, when the kid was like, tragically, when the kid was young? It's almost as if the writers kind of forget that they're supposed to be cousins, and maybe
I don't know, man. Luke and Leia made out.
True.
So
very true.
You know, stuff goes down. I don't know.
That's true.
I know people. You know, their parents, cousins. So
still far better if it's consensual and they're age appropriate.
Yeah,
this is true.
This is very
Jesus, by today's standards.
I mean, and it's Canada. I don't know what the laws are there.
Yeah.
And it should be noted that it's supposed to be Chicago is where they're based. But yeah, it's definitely
Yes.
Canada.
Good luck with that.
Zach, what build off of what Diallo was talking about, go in your own direction. I mean, we still have a lot more on both of these episodes
Of
to talk
course.
about, so we'll kind of we'll be in Friday the 13th for a little while.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of what Diallo was saying, I was just nodding my head the whole time. First of all, before I forget, I think Ryan's character like gets possessed by the devil or gets a demon in him or something, and it's like a whole God episode. And I'm right with you on that, Diallo. He's the heart and soul of that show. I honestly is like Robbie was like the sex symbol, sultry. She felt like a Doctor Who sidekick, which is not a knock. I think it's very much like that's a better role for her. I don't prefer her as being the one to carry the show. I thought Ryan is he's so good. He throws a karate kick, by the way, at the Scarecrow at one point. I'm like, this dude is badass in his horrible ski sweater in the Scarecrow episode. But I echo the theme song, that like it's an amazing theme song. It's amazing. The minute I started watching this again, it brought me back to being a kid watching at night.
Zach, doesn't it like, how like especially when you're watching cartoons and they have to, in the opening, they have to verbally tell you what the setup of the show is, like, brought together by fate. This family got bionics, and like every episode. This opening actually shows you visually what the show is about by just going through all of the like creatures and the accursed objects, and it's like creepy with the music, so you kind of get what they're doing by the time you get within the show if you had never watched it. So I think it's brilliant in that way, and it's very well shot. Like it actually feels in a way like how they put all the money into doing like the opening for Silverhawks or Thundercats, and then you get into the show and it's not as good. That's almost like what that opening is. Like you tell that they actually put some money into it.
No, totally. I absolutely, because once you get into it, you're like, oh, the animation's not as good as that opening segment was. And just like this, you're like, oh, the set design or the acting with obviously the leads withstanding is not as tight as it could be. But by the way, the font that they use at the end of the episode is so reminiscent of Tales from the Dark Side.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's the exact same font, just a different color. I think it's like orange. So many nostalgic feels about this show. I had that same vibe. I'm like, oh, this feels like the X-Files to me. Oh, this feels like the Conjuring couple. This feels like so many things. If they rebooted this series, I know we say that a lot, but if they rebooted this series and just maybe made it note for note, but just with a better budget, this would be fantastic. And I think, when this came out, Jason was so hot at that time. Part 8 had just come out, right? The Jason Takes Manhattan. He was legendary. So, of course, people are going to get upset that this has no connection to the movie franchise. But if this had come out at a different time, it would have been, maybe the same as Halloween 3. When Halloween 3 came out and it was like, where's the connection to Michael Myers? It's the same kind of idea if you think about it. Like they're trying to branch out. They're trying to just capitalize off the name. I get that. But immediately I'm like, the tone is great. I love that the Uncle Lewis, goes straight to hell in the first episode. Literally goes to hell, guys. Like there's a portal to hell. You see it happen. And then that doll is creepy as hell. Sarah Polley is the most annoying little kid. And so she's a good actor, I guess, because I think that's what she's supposed to do. The ending of the first episode is brilliant, where they all go, oh my God. And that's how the episode ends. You're like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And Diallo chose Scarecrow. And I mean, I didn't know which way to go. I'm looking at the cast, and everybody from like Tia Carrere and Vanity guest starred on this, and a who's who of like television actors and screen actors at that time, and a lot of Canadian people, but obviously not. So now I'm like, I want to watch this entire series. But Scarecrow was creepy as hell. The Scarecrow looks like the Gimp fused with a scarecrow.
Yeah.
It's the coolest looking scarecrow I've seen. It's like the guy in The Collector,
Yeah.
the villain in The Collector. It's like a leather looking mask that he has on. There's beheadings. Heads get chopped off on this show. There's blood. There's gore, a shit ton of gore. It is really, and by the way, that Scarecrow episode, I was like, they should do a Picker Sister type show where Picker Sisters go throughout the country finding like weird items that make it fictional, but make it shot like reality show, where they find these little artifacts and it turns out to be a cursed item. I was like, oh, it's like the Picker Sisters, like traveling through the country and seeing a scarecrow, and the scarecrow comes to life. I loved it. I was reminded that I actually liked this show way better than I remembered I liked it.
Yeah. So the Scarecrow episode, I texted the boys after I watched it. I was like, this episode was fantastic. Now, guys and gals, take that with like a grain of salt and put it to what we're what we're kind of, putting it next to and everything. Take it in context. And I think as far as a representation of what this show has to offer, I think it was a fantastic showing. Like Zach said, the Scarecrow looked great. But Diallo, I think actually putting the money into the show itself, like there were some shots in the Scarecrow episode, like when the old lady's running through the cornfield and whatnot. And I thought it looked almost Tim Burton-esque with the fog going through there and everything. And then the fact that like the Scarecrow was being controlled by this lady, and she was like, this is all Sleepy Hollow. Like Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow like ripped off, I think, this episode because the Scarecrow's cutting people's heads off and everything. I love the look of it. Like it looked cold. Like you could tell that it was like filmed in the fall up north, and that just gave it this Halloween vibe. And it's not even the Halloween episode. There is a Halloween episode. I didn't watch it, but this one felt very Halloweeny to me. And as Zach said, there was some heads coming off. Like you don't technically see it, but you see enough to be like, oh my God, that's a head on TV.
You know what went down.
And I'll piggyback. So I literally watched this show earlier in the day, pick up Bodie from school, and we go to the local cafe, and he's eating a cookie. I'm drinking a latte, and I said, I watched this show today called Friday the 13th, and he's like, well, what's it about? And I told him the Scarecrow episode. I said, here's the premise. This Scarecrow, it gets a picture put on its body, and whoever face is on the body of the Scarecrow, that's the Scarecrow goes after that person and tries to kill them. And he's like, whoa, that's so cool. I go, yeah. And at the end of the episode, the picture that he has on him gets pulled off, and he kind of falls to the ground like he's powerless. And then the picture of the person that's like the main bad guy falls on the Scarecrow and goes after him. And he kills the main bad guy. Yeah. He's like, whoa, that's so cool. I'm like, yeah. And after he kills her, like, he's powerless again because he did his job. And he's like, can I watch that? I'm like, no.
When you're older.
He said, tell me more. I want to know more. And I said, well, here's this idea of this antique shop with all these cursed items. He's like, oh, because he's big into Dungeons and Dragons. It was like right up his alley. You describe this show to a kid that's into like fantasy, and they're hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Now, Diallo, how did you land on Scarecrow for us to watch? Because you were the one that sent that one out, and again, thank God you did, because it was fantastic. But also talk about it some, because your conversation, what you said, mostly stuck with the first episode. What were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so because like I don't remember episodes per se, but I do remember at some point in the first season being really terrified by one of the episodes. Like that my memory, but I for the life of me could not remember what it was. And so I went back and I looked at like the list of like the scariest or the high. Actually, it was I checked it against scariest and highest like rated, and that one came up in the 1 and 2. And so I watched that one, and I kind of glanced over a couple others. The actual Halloween episode I watched because I thought that might have been it, but that wasn't it. That was a little bit more campy weird. But yeah, I found that one, and it was like the opening shot, like you were saying, like. At first I was like, "Oh, they're on location." Like that, and I actually had
Yeah.
this feeling like when you're watching old school Doctor Who, and whenever they were like outside and they shot on film, it just automatically looked more like prestigious than when they were on set and it was in video. That's how I felt like as soon as they were like outside, it took on a whole other field. It was like you said, it was creepy, and I didn't have that feeling like they're on a set somewhere, and it was fabricated. So yeah, it just like it had slasher vibes. It was like,
Yeah.
I think, and in terms of it being called Friday the 13th, like at the time I like that was a couple days ago. I didn't realize that this show was never connected at all, like in any intention. It was just made to capitalize on the name, but I thought that was their attempt when I watched it a few days ago to like give you a slasher type, episode for Jason, but it wasn't. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was. I don't know. It was good. Edge of my seat. It was creepy. It was well done. It did, and that was the other thing. Like the mom gave me Voorhees.
Yeah,
Jason
Mrs. Voorhees.
Yeah, yeah. Like it was really good.
Yeah, it was. Again,
Yeah.
like I said, I texted the boys. I was like, the Scarecrow episode was fantastic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I highly recommend people watch that one. I will say that, like, aside from the fashion, which I love, and Roby's amazingly massive wall of hair that she has, and my God, she's stunning. But one thing that I think dates it is she always seems to have gotten in trouble, and then she screams out for Ryan to help her and everything. And I watching the two episodes, and I'm sure there's going to be other episodes where she have a bit more agency and everything to her. But the episodes that I saw, I was like, oh man, I wish, I wish that you would have been a little bit more, heroic in your own right. But she did sort of tend to devolve into the "oh God help me" type of thing,
Dude,
and that's the time. I get it.
In the pilot, I definitely thought that because, like, when she gets on the little merry-go-round deal, she jumped on it to like grab the doll, right? But then she all of a sudden became powerless. It was like she couldn't be
Yeah.
the one to do it, and then Ryan steps up. And like and it wasn't like he didn't do anything that she couldn't have done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just was like, oh yeah, it's definitely, they had to like make her all of a sudden helpless. And
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, 1987. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she falls into that typical trope, and you're just like, I will say that's one of the downbeats of the show, or the thing that draws you back is like the banter sometimes between the two of them. It gets a little annoying. She comes across, her character is snobby and annoying. She's a rich character in the beginning, in the pilot. She leaves her, what is it, fiance
Yeah,
or
fiance,
boyfriend or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Who's
Yeah.
a douchebag.
And
Yeah,
he's so, like,
in my notes I
"Oh,
wrote he's a total
rah."
douchebag.
Yeah,
Total
he's like,
Yeah.
he's 80s douchebag, guys and gals.
Yeah, he's like a lawyer, and he's like, I want to introduce you to the firm, her partners, that they're getting engaged. Like, he's that kind of guy.
Yep.
Doesn't care about what she likes. But I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why it stands out for her, because her character is actually a pretty strong-willed, kind of independent woman vibe character, but then all of a sudden she collapses, and so she's actually, that banter that they have is her like kind of shutting him down a lot, and kind of her being, at least in that pilot episode, it's sort of like she's the one in control of the conversations, and he's kind of like chasing or something. So she has like the masculine energy a lot in the show, but then when it comes down to the wire, all of a sudden she just like loses it all, and she she's helpless and she can't do anything for herself, and then Ryan steps up and kind of saves the day. And you know,
karate kicks.
Yeah,
He karate kicks.
yeah.
I was like, damn, that's a sweet kick.
because
in
he's
the-
not
in
a
the
very
Scarecrow.
like masculine character, right? So then
No.
it just seems odd that in those moments all of a sudden he's like, take charge. But
Which is
Yeah,
which is kind of like, I think, something I liked about his character. It's like he's very non-assuming, but then he will take charge at times when he needs to, which is kind of cool.
yeah,
And by the way, in that Scarecrow episode, it's nice to hear the word hullabaloo used in a sentence.
what's all the hullabaloo?
I
And
did
another
write down.
guy- yeah.
I did write down a quote from that episode when that lady, the bad lady controlling the Scarecrow, she sets up this like red herring. This guy who can't really talk. He clearly is supposed to be like mentally challenged, but he has a thing for Roby, and she tells him, she goes, "Gotta break her before you can ride her," and then she goes, "Break her good," and I was like, Jesus Christ.
And the follow-up to that is his father, the boy's father, saying, "That's our boy. That's our business."
Yes, I know, it's crazy. So
So if
Fi-
anyone ever says to me anything about Bodhi, I'll go, "That's our boy. That's our business."
So, talking about whether we like this, Friday 13th or not, I want to go back to what I said before about what the zeitgeist is. I feel like a lot of us, back in the day, remembered Friday 13th fondly, remembered Freddy's Nightmares fondly because it has Freddy in it, and then we all talk about not liking Friday 13th because Jason Voorhees wasn't in it. And then the zeitgeist of nowadays, when you talk to people about these two shows, you'll get the mouth breathing nerd, which we are as well, say, "Oh, but actually, Friday the 13th was actually the better show. It was better written, yada yada yada, and Freddy's Nightmares is trash." And
Audience, you
I'll tell
can't
you-
see it, but Corey's pinky was out when he was talking.
yeah, absolutely is out.
It was, and he has a pencil mustache now.
And I was playing with it. And
And a monocle.
We'll talk about Freddy's Nightmares when we get to it. But I will say that I thought Friday the 13th was damn good watching it now. And again, when I say damn good, put it in context. I'm not comparing this to newer shows, something, I don't know, Game of Thrones or whatever. I'm comparing it.
You can't.
You can't. I'm comparing it to what my expectations were of it and compared to other shows roughly that I remember around the time. And I thought both episodes were very good. I thought Scarecrow was fantastic. I'll say it again. But what kind of kept me locked in was, again, the rapport between the two cousins. They had a great chemistry. I don't care. They had a great chemistry. I liked Ryan. I liked Mickey. The third guy wasn't in the Scarecrow's episode, so I didn't really have much to kind of go off on him.
That was
But-
interesting that he wasn't there, actually.
And
Yeah.
they kind of
'cause
mentioned
he's
that
integral.
he's following his own angle on a different sort
Yeah.
of thing. So I like, at least they mentioned that. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed these two episodes, and I am considering picking up the DVD set just to have it, because I think it was pretty. My memory was not correct, and maybe I should have given this more of a shot when I was a kid. Zach, Friday 13th, final thoughts on the series?
Yeah, I was going to say one more thing about the Scarecrow. It reminded me a little bit of Italian horror, the way the design was. Italian zombies, for example.
Yeah.
And then the Scarecrow episode reminded me, Diallo, of when the Five Doctors came out and they couldn't get Tom Baker for the show, or they had some sort of dispute. So they were like, "Oh, he's here where all the other doctors are there," and
He
they
was
just
in
used
the-
stock footage from an old episode.
He was in he was in that river with what's her name? Remember, he was in the gondola or whatever in the
in,
in
like,
the river,
France
and then
or whatever.
and then some ball of light zapped him away, and then at the very end of the episode, it zapped him back in or something.
Yeah,
I
because
don't know.
he's stuck. He's stuck in. He didn't get sent to the Master's playground or
Yeah.
whatever, the Time Lord's playground. Anyway, yeah, go see the Five Doctors, by the way, if you want. That's a really fun episode of Doctor Who. Old school. Final thoughts. Frightfully overjoyed in a good way. Like, I'm so happy that we watched the show again, and reminded me that it was good. It is good. you can't put it in context to today's stuff. You just can't. So you got to take it for what it is. I will happily watch more episodes of this show again. And sometimes all it takes is a great theme song to get you in there and you're done. And the end credits where they just say executive produced Frank Mancuso Jr. It's like kind of creepy the way the font is. I'm a sucker for font as well. And if the font is bad, I'll split second, done, canceled. No. I'm just overall glad we watched them, and go watch the show. If you've never seen it, go watch it.
And Roby being smoking hot did not hurt whatsoever.
Agreed.
Diallo?
Yeah, I often find that I think over the course of my life that I'm sort of like an insular geek in that I don't like, it's sort of like I remember watching certain things, but I never really I was never like in any broad conversation with any group of people about the value of whether this was good or bad or not. Like maybe like a few friends that I had. So there's a lot of things that I just assumed everybody loved or everybody hated, and I find out that they didn't like something like 20, 30 years later. So like in the case of this, I loved it. So, and I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk. I've not talked about that show until today, like with anybody. And so I went away from it just being like, oh yeah, I loved the show. And like, there was never not anything about it I didn't like. I remember getting over the fact that it had, nothing to do with Jason Voorhees pretty early. And I just was like, oh, it's its own thing. But I still I watched it for at least a year and a half or 2 years. And then, we'll talk about the other show. And I had my opinion about that right out of the gate, and I've always held that opinion. So watching this again, it was more of just like reaffirming like what I liked. Like I was like, I used to like this show, and like I still like it, and I was seeing the value in it and how it did things and what it did. I'm probably a little bit more open to it now because I'm not like, where's Jason? Where's the hot? That stuff isn't there. And so, yeah, I thought it was great. I do think, often I think they could do a remake, but this is one of those ones where I actually think if they did a remake, people would be like, oh, you're just stealing from X-Files and Warehouse 13, with people not realizing that those shows probably took from this or Kolchak Night Stalker. Is that the
Yeah.
So it's like I find that like when John Carter of Mars came out, like people were like, oh, you're just stealing from Star Wars, and it's like, no, you don't.
It's like, no, you don't understand.
Completely.
Star Wars stole from Flash Gordon, which stole from John Carter of Mars.
You got it all backwards.
I feel like too they need to just slap a little comment in the beginning of these if they reboot a show like this. For everyone, before you start hating this show, just know that the source material came out way before all the things you love.
Way before. Yeah. So that was something that kind of popped up a little bit with Dune. Also, it was like, oh, it's Star Wars. I'm like, no.
No, no.
George Lucas definitely read Dune before he wrote Star Wars.
Of course he did.
Sand planet. Anyways.
Yeah, why do you think Tatooine is a sand planet? Come on, guys.
Come on now.
Come on. Anyways, so it is a show that I do think like if it was actually able to be done today, it actually could be a really good show because it had to, like, this show was like in syndication on TV in the 80s, so it had to be safe in a lot of ways to just be on the air. But like, dude, like I remember watching The Walking Dead when I watched it those first couple seasons, and like they did stuff far worse on TV that you could do in the movies, in terms of like the gore and stuff.
Right.
And so you could do this show and actually make it like legit scary. And get creative with the cursed objects and kind of really go in there and put your main characters through the paces. But for what it was at the time, it actually, like I said, I think it was like kind of like a spiritual ancestor of like X-Files, which came out just like a few years later.
Yeah.
So out of Canada, no less. So
Right.
yeah, I really dug it, and I'm gonna keep watching a few more episodes. I want to find that one episode that scared me, but I can't. Like I don't remember at all what it was.
Please
So,
let us know which one it is when you do find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we all felt pretty much the exact same way about Friday the 13th, the series. So let's see if we feel the exact same way about Freddy's Nightmares.
Let's see.
Hey everybody, co-host Corey here. I just wanted to take a second and say thank you to all of our Patreon members who help support the show. Each month, they get access to The Carpenter Factor, Wrap Up After Dark, and all kinds of other fun exclusive content. You can sign up for our Patreon over at patreon.com/podcastingafterdark. Again, that's patreon.com/podcastingafterdark. Other ways you can help support the show and help us grow is leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We also have a merch store where you can pick up a t-shirt or two, as well as some other fun items. You can find every link to our podcatchers, to our merch store, to Patreon, everything at podcastingafterdark.com. That's podcastingafterdark.com. Now back to the show. Freddy's Nightmares. Freddy's Nightmares is a horror anthology television series which aired in syndication from October 1988 to March 1990. A spin-off from the A Nightmare on Elm Street film series, each episode is introduced by Freddy Krueger, played by Robert Englund, and features 2 different stories. Only 8 of these stories featured Krueger as the antagonist, though. Freddy's Nightmares was produced by New Line Television and distributed by Lorimar Telepictures, then Warner Brothers Television. Similar to the Crypt Keeper, Freddy Krueger's primary function is to host the series. He is featured in regular bumper segments where he comments on the happenings of the story, culminating in him giving a quick and usually eerie epilogue at the end. One element that made the series unique is the 2-tier story approach. Most episodes feature 2 different stories that each take up the first and second halves. The second story, however, is usually built on a character who played a minor or supporting role in the first story. It should be noted that A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 would be coming out in 1988, around the same time that this aired. So I think that was September, October of 88, and this came out in 88. So that kind of puts into context where Freddy, or where A Nightmare on Elm Street was at this time. So I guess when this was in development, there was pretty much 1, 2, and 3 were out, and then 4 was coming out pretty much at the same time. So the 2 episodes we discussed were Season 1, Episode 1, No More Mr. Nice Guy, which is pretty much a retelling, because we've seen it in some of the movies or whatever, but it's pretty much the origin story of Freddy Krueger, to the point where he even says, when he intros the show, he's like, "This one's my nightmare," and I always remember that, by the way. And the second one, Season 1, Episode 4, Freddy's Tricks and Treats, which is a Halloween episode, although it's not too Halloween-y, but it does feature Mariska Hargitay from Law and Order.
Hargitay. Yeah,
Hargitay.
Yeah.
Hargitay.
From Law and Order SVU, as like she's a doctor, and she's in training and everything.
Med school.
In college, med school. There's some stuff. I don't know. It's
Gong gong.
I hated this episode. Anyways,
It
guys
was
and
so
gals,
traumatizing. She went to the Special Victims Unit in New York City after this.
I know. So the first half of it is more focused on her kind of overcoming a trauma from her past. And then the second half of the episode, she's in it, but it's kind of focused on her and these other people who are studying her dreams to see sort of what's happening with Freddy. So that's sort of the 2 episodes we watched. Zach, take us off into any direction you want to.
Well, I think out of anything, good or bad, this show has to offer, one major positive is the casting of this show. This show, in 44 episodes, it has a who's who of 80s and 90s and future stars, including Todd Allen, who we love from Witchboard, Sandal Bergman, who we love from Conan. You've got Tony Dow, who was from Leave It to Beaver. You've got Andrew Prine, who has been like, he's a character actor who's been in everything from, The Eliminators to Lords of Salem. Tracy Walter, who we love in Out of the Dark.
Yeah, he was also Bob the Goon in Batman.
Of course. You've got a very young, in fact, it was one of his first roles, Brad Pitt is in one episode. Jeffrey Combs, Jeff Conaway from Grease fame, of course. Rest in peace. Yes, Charles Cyphers, who we love from so many Carpenter movies. Go check out the Carpenter Factor on patreon.com/Carpenter Factor. Sorry, patreon.com/podcasting after dark for more info about that.
William Butler from Night of the Living Dead, the remake, is in it, and our pal Diane Franklin.
Of course, Bill Moseley, Chop Top, the man himself. Leah Ayres from Bloodsport fame, and of course, Maniac. Not Maniac, but, The Burning, and, like a who's who.
Kyle Chandler from Friday Night Lights, my second favorite show of all time.
John Cameron Mitchell from Hedwig and the Angry Inch, who, if you've never seen that movie, you should. Lori Petty.
Yvette Nepar from Dr. Mordred, and she was also in Adventures of not Buckaroo Banzai, Briscoe County Jr. But yes. Yvette Nepar, she was a Canadian actor, because I think this show is another one of those Canadian shows.
Tim Russ from my most hated second most hated Star Trek show, Star Trek Voyager.
There you go. So in the second episode we watched the Tricks and Treats, Darren Dalton, who many people know as the cheeseball, a sellout in Red Dawn. He was also in The Outsiders. We interviewed him on $2 late fee if you're interested in checking out that one.
Is he the one they execute because he gave them up?
This is the mayor's son.
Yes, he has
the
mayor's son, exactly. It is literally a who's Dick Miller. I mean, like we could keep going on this list. It's a who's who of amazing people, and of course headlined by Robert Englund. So the first episode, No More Mr. Nice Guy, which I always associate with Shocker, directed by Wes Craven.
Right.
And I think, first of all, the TV reporter is like a John Tesh with dark hair and a mustache. I'm like, is that John Tesh? It's not John Tesh.
And Zach, before we even go any further, let's mention that the first episode, the pilot episode, No More Mr. Nice Guy, was directed by Tobe Hooper.
Yes, and actually, in the second episode, Tricks and Treats, is directed by Ken Wiederhorn, who did Shockwaves, Return of the Living Dead Part 2, yada, 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 and yada, yada, yada. So Ken Wiederhorn actually, I believe, directed 7 episodes of this show. So, thank you or no thank you to Ken Wiederhorn. But we love Shockwaves, obviously, and Return of the Living Dead 2. So something that really stood out to me, and I'm like, oh God, is this nitpicking? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And it's something I've always really bugged me about the Freddy Krueger series, is it's like so cartoonish at times, where Freddy Krueger is like on the stand in trial and he's got his hat and he's got a sweater on. And I'm like, why is this guy not wearing a prison outfit? Of course they don't shoot him from the face. I think overall, Robert Englund shot his scene separate from everybody. I don't think he's ever in a scene with anybody, to the point where, like, if he's on his back looking up at a character, like in the second episode we watched, it's a totally different set that he's in, whatever. It's way back in the day, low budget.
But no.
But no.
There's no, like I have some stuff to say. I
think from a nostalgic perspective, I think people will be like, oh, I love that show. It's not a good show. Oh, by the way, Diane Franklin. Shout out to Diane Franklin because she's in an episode as well. Oh, and Joyce Heiser from Just One of the Guys. And that's directed by Lisa Gottlieb. So Lisa Gottlieb, who directed Just One of the Guys, did an episode of this show with Sherry Shattuck from Death Spa as well. And yeah, I think from a nostalgic perspective, I can see why people would pop boners over this movie, over this TV series, but I mean, it's a show.
It happened.
I will say,
happened.
I do want to say real quick, because all this discussion about who's in it and everything. In the first episode, the cop that kind of plays he arrested Krueger, but he kind of messed up, and that's how Freddy Krueger gets off trial and everything. And they kind of try to bring in every element. They try to bring in the singing 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. And I think they really try to keep the lore the same. And again, they had 3 movies, already ahead of it, so they kind of had to. But I appreciated them trying to include little lore items like the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. But the guy who played the arresting officer, and he's kind of the main character for the first episode, his name is Ian Patrick Williams. He was in Robot Jocks, Alien Nation, the TV series, Dolls, Terror Vision, Reanimator, and an episode of Seinfeld.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean,
so
and
I didn't mean to cut you off. Keep going, Zach.
No, it's okay. He probably did a lot of work. Obviously, did a lot of work with Stuart Gordon, who did Robot Jocks and Dolls and Reanimator. I mean, look, I appreciate the kills. This is an edgy series. Some of the dialogue in the second episode we watched was very rough for the time, I think, and I applaud that. I think it was cool to see felt like an R-rated show on syndication and in normal TV. I appreciate the gore scenes, and that's about it. Really, I just feel like the acting was kind of lazy. The lead actor that you mentioned, he was good, and I thought he was trying his best. But yeah, it just felt very low budge and one of you might have already mentioned it. Felt like a cash grab. And honestly, Friday the 13th honestly, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, the Dream Warriors, that to me is like the last. That's where it ends for me, the franchise. Yeah. And then it picks back up with New Nightmare.
Yeah.
I just felt like, was this the beginning of the cash cow years where they're like, we've got action figures and we've got posters and we're going to put them on MTV and we're going to make this child killer a fun character for kids. That's what it felt like to me. So that's my rant and
final thoughts and all in one.
So basically,
kind of
F this show. F Freddy's Nightmares.
I didn't get to the second episode. I chose the second episode of the Tricks and Treats because Mariska Hargitay, who is the granddaughter of
no, she's the daughter of Jane Mansfield.
The daughter of Jane Mansfield.
I didn't know that.
She was in the car when that killed Jane Mansfield.
Wow.
Her brother, I think. Yeah. They were in the
wow.
car.
I didn't know that at all.
Yeah.
This is before she did The Perfect Weapon with Jeff Speakman. I thought
she was in The Perfect Weapon? I had never seen her in anything until other than SVU. When this was starting, I was like, whoa. I recognized her voice and everything. And I was like, wait a minute. And then her name popped up. That's the only thing I've ever seen her in is SVU until today.
I didn't know you liked her as much as you do. And so, but I'm like, I don't know, something about Mariska Hargitay. I'm going with this episode.
Yeah,
we got to watch this one. And it pays off. Trust me, it pays off.
It's funny because my older sister loves SVU. She loves Marissa Hargitay and everything. And I was like, halfway through the episode, I was like, let me send this to her. I think she'll get a kick out of this. And it was literally 2 minutes later after I sent my sister the link. She's like, I watch it. Then there's this strip scene that's it makes sense in the show, but at the same time, it was kind of it is still sort of standalone, and I'm just like, I made a big mistake.
I mean, it is a very Skinamax level, borderline Skinamax.
Yeah.
Zach,
sexy.
you mentioned the gore and everything in this show. I didn't think there was any gore in all worth noteworthy.
I guess not. I mean, I guess not. I guess you're right. There's a level of woman gets her face scratched, and I thought that was pretty gross. And yeah, I guess I take that back. I'm allowed one take back per episode. That's my take back. So yeah, there's not a whole lot going on. Again, I'll go back to my original thought. It's a nostalgic show. You get to see these actors way back when, before they were a big deal. The episode with Brad Pitt has Bill Moseley in it too, so that's worth checking out. And that's about it. Like, you get Freddy Krueger's one-liners are buried, they're mumbled. The episode of the Tricks and Treats at the end, he like, you see him sticking, blood's coming out of a VCR, and he's like, "Stick that in your VCR, sucker!" And then just ends. And it's so mumbled the way he says it. I had to rewind it like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't do anything for me. The quality went boom.
Yeah.
Downhill. But I'll turn it over to you guys. Diallo, thoughts?
Diallo, can you bring this up at all?
Not really. Like I don't.
You're like, don't put that evil on me.
Yeah, it's like, so I never had any disdain for this show. Like, I just remember, I remember being really anticipatory when I Freddy's Nightmares, and I remember that Friday night watching it, and then kind of feeling a little deflated, and then but at least it was that first night, I think it was about Freddy. And I can't remember if it was they showed 2 episodes or whatever, because I do remember at some point with my friends talking about how this has nothing to do with Freddy. He introduces the show, and then it's some other stories.
It's Twilight Zone. It's a Twilight Zone series.
Yeah, so
it's Tales from the Crypt. He's the Crypt Keeper,
Yeah, so I don't even think I watched it. I might have watched, maybe half the season or something, and then I just moved on, because it just wasn't very good. But I also wasn't at that time in my life, I wasn't the critical a-hole I am now, so I just kind of was it's whatever, it's stupid, and then I just moved on. I was watching whatever. This was 1987, whatever, that first year, 88.
Yeah.
So I mean, dude, there were so many things I was watching. I was just so into wrestling at that time, and cartoons, and so that just kind of shifted out. But I always remember I watched it. I really loved it. There was one thing though, and you guys probably can clear it up for me, is in the movie series, and I only realized this now because I really liked the idea of the pilot episode of Freddy's Nightmares, because I feel like it was the first time they showed his the trial and confronting the parents and getting burned and that stuff. And I feel like there were only glimpses of that in the movies.
Yeah,
and also in the movies, I think the kids burned him. Was it the kids of?
No, it was the adults. No, it was the adults. I think, funnily enough, the pilot, I think, was fairly accurate to the quote unquote Freddy canon and everything.
Yeah.
What you're thinking of in the movies, we never really saw the full trial and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What we did see was that one, I think that was with Freddy's Nightmares, when we saw a young Freddy being beaten on by his dad, who was played by, I think, Alice Cooper, and the guy who played young Freddy, Tobe Sexton. I used to actually work with that guy in Santa Monica. He actually was a salesman for a video game localization company. He kind of worked for them, so he wasn't really even acting anymore. But that was always kind of his big claim to fame. Super nice guy, really cool dude. But he played the young Freddy in, I think that was Freddy's Freddy's Dead. I think that was the movie that showed the flashback or whatever. But we never got all of this. This, I think, kind of lives, and probably what makes the TV show so much more appealing to Freddy fans is because we actually get to see this.
Yeah, that was my thing, because I was really especially at the time, because in the Dream Warriors was the third one, right?
Yes.
And I think that might have been the last one I saw. I think I saw 4, and I didn't really, it was a letdown from 3, and then I don't think I've actually seen any other Freddy movie since then. I've never seen Freddy's Nightmares, the one that came out in '98 or whatever, that Wes Craven came back and directed.
That one's good. I like that one.
Yeah, I heard that one was good. I just never like by that time. It was like over for me. But I remember that. I remember Dream Warriors was like it was like a movie where they started to like plant these seeds, and that like there was this lore that like, oh, this is how he came to be, and they kind of like touched on it in a mysterious way, but they didn't really. They left it up to you to kind of interpret the details, and this episode actually shows that to you. So I appreciate that. And I liked how they rolled that into it being about like the sheriff or dad or cop or whatever and how that affected him. But then I remember watching later episodes and it was just like random stuff going on and it was pretty disappointing and didn't care and just kind of like lost interest in it. But I don't know. Like I feel like the bits with like Freddy doing his one-liners and stuff. That's like to me that's what he was. So that doesn't like bother me when I like even when I was watching this one. I was like, oh yeah, he used to do that. That's right. But that was the thing that set him apart from all the other slasher characters. So that was he's like wisecracking. He's like a early version of Deadpool or something. So anyway, but it wasn't like good, but I didn't think it was terrible either. Like it didn't like make me like angry or anything. There's something that I kind of mentioned yesterday. It was like in relation to Star Wars actually. Because there was like some meme going around how like, and I've joked about this before, where in like 20 years, the kids that are kids now are going to feel about the sequel trilogy like say millennials feel about the prequel trilogy. And I kind of was like, yeah, nostalgia is much more powerful than quality. Right.
Yes.
And so, like in relation to this show, it's like the nostalgia definitely is much more powerful than like the quality. So as I'm watching it, I can see how like the production value, it just everything about it just feels like I can't tell you where or how, but it feels like they're cutting corners everywhere.
Yeah.
But like there's the nostalgia there, so it's like I can't quite see it through clear eyes. I don't think it's good, but I don't like it. It's not making me angry either. But like, I'm gonna keep talking. But like, that part about like Freddy at the beginning, like when he's in the chair or whatever, like I was like, why don't you just have Robert Englund? Like
exactly.
Why like he's there? Why don't you show him? And so then I was thinking, oh, maybe he wasn't a part of the show. Maybe it was like a different actor that was doing Freddy, because there was a lot of times Freddy's face was in the dark, so you couldn't even see him.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, like were they using like some other guy's voice? I just until I realized that Robert Englund was like he was Freddy, and then it just made me. That part sent me a little bit because I was like, those are like the little bits and pieces that actually would have made the show like better. But it was just like they were cutting corners and just like, let's ramp this product out. And, and everyone will love it because it's Freddy. And they're going to get the album too. They're going to love it. I remember listening to that album then and being like disappointed because I was like, why is he singing like Wooly Bully?
Well, so I mean, I was probably most excited to watch the first episode, the pilot, because of the origin story, and I remember it, and I remember even the bumper of him being like, "Don't worry, kiddies, this is my nightmare this time," and like I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool thing. You feel a little bit more relaxed going into it, but like what I think illustrates the entire thing or the downfall of the episode is that the main protagonist, the cop guy that I was saying, Ian Patrick Williams, like he gets at the very end, he gets his from Freddy, but it's like in a dentist chair. It kind of like had no, you would think he would have been burned or something, that Freddy would have, some kind of revenge, and it would be fitting with how Freddy went out. But all it was this guy had to, even though he's freaking out the entire episode, he like chips a tooth. So like he has to go in and like get it fixed, and he kind of goes under the laughing gas. And Diallo and I remarked, then all of a sudden the dental assistant is like in her underwear. So of course that now he's in a dream or something. But I was like, oh, that's I perked up a little bit right there.
Or was he in a dream? Or was he in a dream?
Right, or it's like Seinfeld. It's but like so. I think that illustrates, like, it started out decent, aside from, like, the fact that, like, yeah, you could tell Robert Englund was not on set. And I thought maybe they were just doing it as sort of artistic interpretation where you don't really ever see Freddy's face and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. There was one shot where they kind of zoomed in, and you could tell it was Robert Englund's mouth, but there was, like, one of those, like, shadows and everything. But now that I look back on it, I think you guys are right. I think he was not ever actually there when they're filming it, and they film all those little scenes on the side. And then the second episode, the Freddy's Tricks and Treats, I mean, I was fucking falling asleep during this thing. And I'm watching it at like 1 p.m. this afternoon. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is so boring. And dude, there was barely any kills. I think maybe 2 people total died that episode, and you didn't see anything. And yeah, there was like this autopsy scene, but that's an autopsy, who cares? It was the biggest problem I had with the show is that it was fucking boring, even with Freddy doing the bumpers and everything. And that was fine. I mean, I'll say that, like, he is Freddy. I will not take that away. Just like, no matter what, the Crypt Keeper's always the Crypt Keeper. Freddy was Freddy in every episode, even if he's in the bumpers and barely in the actual show itself. I think he acts like Freddy. I think his little quips are like Freddy. He looks like Freddy. Some of the stuff's actually kind of filmed sort of cool with some cool shadows and stuff and everything. But the body, what was actually in these 2 episodes, just a snooze fest. And, like Diallo, like you said, I felt the same thing, man. Like, I'm like, there's something lacking here. In like first episode directed by Tobe Hooper, trash. That episode was trash. And I'm like, oh, Tobe Hooper, putting your name on this thing, fucking Alan Smithy should have directed this thing.
Isn't that when he got fired from Poltergeist?
maybe. But yeah, I that was my takeaway. I was excited to go into it, not being the biggest Freddy fan, but still, obviously, having nostalgia for Freddy, and just being bored. And then, Friday the 13th has no Jason Voorhees in it, but the writing was good, and the characters were interesting, and it shot really well, and it seems like, especially Scarecrow, seems like it has a budget. Like, I don't know. Something went wrong with the Freddy's Nightmares on some angle.
Well, I've got one possible idea or theory about that, or why it failed so much more. But before I get to that, I want to point out I appreciate that they kept it in Springwood.
Yes,
that's the fictional town that it takes place. And in the Tricks or Treats, there is a shot of the Elm Street house, and at one point, Mariska's character Marcia, she's in like the boiler room of of where Freddy would do his killing, and so I appreciate that. I thought that was kind of cool, but Freddy is such an iconic, memorable character, and those movies are built around him talking the whole time and selling himself. Unlike the first one, where he doesn't talk that much, and I think that's why I like the first one so much, because it's truly a horror film. It's not a horror comedy. But Friday the 13th, Jason doesn't talk. He stalks. So there's a lot more. So it's reliant upon the actors in the movie to carry the stories and the dialogue and keep that flowing. When you take Freddy out of the movie, when he's the biggest reason you're watching it to begin with, like, you're relying on the characters that are kind of lame. And like in so many of these Freddy movies, the actors are kind of lame because they all get killed off anyways, you know? In Friday the 13th, there's no Tommy Jarvis. I know Nancy is like the final girl. She's not that good though. Let's be honest. Like Nancy's not that great. She's really not. And she's only in the first one. And then she comes back in she's in Dream Warriors.
Right? It was great in that one. What are you talking about?
And she's great in that one. I think Dream Warriors actually is the highlight of
her
like, characters and her.
Yeah.
But then they kill off so many characters, and there are good ones in throughout the series, but they kill them all off.
But but
like
the direction I think you're going here is that if Freddy is the thing that we want to see, but yet he's what's in the show the least. You know, like there's some kind of off balance there.
So, yeah, but he's like, and he's teased throughout this thing. He's in the show, but he's in it such a sparing amount where you're like, oh, well, this sucks. At least Friday the 13th was like, nope, we're just going to make this about something totally different.
Yeah, that's what I think the issue is if they were trying to tell these stories. But then they were like, "Oh, we gotta put Freddy in for a second." So like it veered away from like telling an actual good story because it's like like the Mariska Hargitay one. It was like he kept popping up in like these weird moments. I always like forgot. Like it didn't feel like he needed to be in there. Like they just were throwing him in there because it was like, oh yeah, it's Freddy show or whatever. And if you kind of like how Friday the 13th was a little bit of like a bait and switch in terms of like the title. They never intended to have Jason Voorhees, but that's why it was the stronger show because they just were telling the story they were telling. Whereas it was like these anthology stories for Freddy's Nightmare weren't anything that you wouldn't see in like Tales from the Crypt, like which it's like kind of been compared to, or some other shows, Creep Show, whatever. But those stories didn't have Cat's Eye. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
Oh, Cat's Eye.
Yeah.
I like Cat's Eye.
Yeah.
Me too.
And so it's
Drew
like
Barrymore.
Drew Barrymore. She's
Hayes,
canceled now.
James Woods.
Yeah, she's been canceled.
She's canceled
as of like today or yesterday.
Yeah, as of yesterday. But yeah, it's like
Scab.
You know, they like Cat's Eye is an example of where they told separate stories and then they actually had the cat integral. I think it was like in the last story with the
troll,
with the little troll. But like if Freddy's Nightmare had just been he was just the Crypt Keeper and introduced the story, like he introduced Friday Night Videos and let the videos play and didn't jump in the bottom of the screen on Friday Night Videos or something and just like let the videos be the videos, the show would have been a little stronger. But yeah, like the Mariska Hargitay story actually.
To Diallo, to your point, like, and I think what like illustrates it is, I think our minds, like when we watch it, we know that Robert Englund isn't there with Mariska, you know, like on set. And then Zach, like you said, you know, there's a shot of his like face or something, but you can tell that was probably filmed, you know, later. And
it's so bad.
And I think like it's the uncanny valley thing where we just know as a viewer that Robert Englund isn't on set, that there's just something not right because we would have seen his face with the other actor's face. And I think Diallo, I'm thinking to your point, it's like there's something not right about it, and I think it's the lack of Robert Englund.
You know what part of what it is? I'm going to bring up another canceled, although I think he's been released from prison and has been like exonerated maybe, is Fat Albert, Bill Cosby. So if you go back and watch Fat Albert, it's like they have the show, right? And then Bill Cosby would pop up in the middle of it and sort of be like this narrator, kind of like tell you what you're supposed to think about the dilemma that these characters in. And that's kind of what Freddy was. It was like they like whenever they jumped to Bill Cosby, it was like this junkyard, but it was like live action. You could tell it was on like a particular set, right?
Yeah.
And that's what was happening with this show, where all the stuff is going on where whatever the story is, and all of a sudden you're jumping to the boiler room to see Freddy like walk around and say his lines and kind of like interject. But he wasn't really interjecting with anything of substance anyway. He was just popping in with a one-liner or something, and was almost like, "Oh yeah, I'm still here," and then he'd go like he would go to commercial or whatever. So yeah,
There's no tension there. There's no tension there too.
Yeah.
It created no tension whatsoever.
yeah, it just would have been better if he was at. I mean, this is all in hindsight, but it just would have been better if he was at the beginning and end, maybe,
Yeah.
or
Just
not
full on
there at all. Yeah.
Crypt Keeper style.
Yeah.
Full on Crypt Keeper style, and
Yeah.
just and then focus on making a good story that you're not trying to pigeonhole Freddy into.
Yeah, just like these are creepy tales from this town, and then every once in a while, it's actually a story about him.
Yeah.
But I think part of it is like there was the money grab. I mean, this was like sort of like that peak Freddy like era. Like it would have been after 3, and I think because the 3 was like it hit a certain peak after that movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just kind of, I think it's like New Line wanted a show, but again, they couldn't do an R-rated TV show. There were really no outlets for that at the time, unless it was on cable. So
And no one was thinking about doing shows like this on cable.
yeah, so they had to temper it down a lot. And I think that's partly why the show manifested the way it did. So instead of being Freddy focused, they had all these other anthologies. So anyways, it just was like kind of broken from Inception. And, it is what it is. Like I said, it didn't make me mad, but I definitely am like, it wasn't good. And I never thought it was good. Like, again, like what I was saying about Friday the 13th, like when I watched it, I was like, yeah, this isn't very good. And all through the years, I'm like, yeah, it wasn't very good. So I don't have like a change of opinion about it. But it was cool to be able to go back and watch it still, just to kind of see it again.
And I was going to ask, what your, nostalgia versus reality, and you gave that answer. So Zach, on to you. Final thoughts of the two shows, nostalgia versus reality, etc.
Reality for Friday the 13th it's a great series. I look forward to watching it, more episodes of it. Nostalgia, it actually is better than the nostalgia because I didn't have that much nostalgia for it. And now I'm like, oh, outside the opening theme and one or two little things here, I had no real connection to it. Now I really want to watch it again. I want to rewatch it and maybe see if there were episodes that stand out to me and go, oh yeah, that was the episode that caught me, like Diallo was saying, the really scary one. Freddy's Nightmares, I had a lot of nostalgia for this one back in the day, and the nostalgia's still kind of there, but man, the reality is it's a fart show. Like, it just flames out, and there was so much syndication going on at this time in the late 80s, early 90s that was really good. Case in point, we brought up quite a few syndicated shows. It just always rubbed me the wrong way. God bless Robert Englund for having a career and having this character be his Elvira or whatever. But man, I always wanted Freddy to be more sinister. I didn't want him to be comical. I like sinister Freddy, not comical Freddy. This is comical Freddy, and it's slow on the go, and yeah, it flamed out. But I'm again glad we watched it for the nostalgia factor.
I mean, I probably feel exact same way as you, Zach, and you, Diallo, probably back in the day. Yeah, I loved Friday 13th and was shocked by how much I enjoyed these episodes. I wanted to like Freddy's Nightmares more than I did, but it kind of lands probably, yeah, like Diallo, like you said, probably where I felt as a kid too. I was just like, oh, this feels a little underbaked. and I want more out of it. And Zach, like you, I like my Freddy to be a bit more sinister. That's why I think I like the first one. He was pretty sinister in the second one too, I'd say. And
First one, and last one.
Yep, and the last one, New Nightmare, which I really enjoy as well. But yeah,
And the third one too.
Well,
third one too. He's pretty dark.
he is, but it's also like probably the best of the sillier versions of him. And then when it gets too silly, I'm not into Freddy at that point. And it looks like that was always going to be his trajectory, because if this was filmed after part 3 had come out and before, or pretty much premiering the same time as part 4 does, this show seems to be like, they kind of had a clear idea where Freddy was going, and that was kind of in a tongue-in-cheek world, and kind of just being a personality and everything.
Corey,
but
I think a lot of times in those instances, what happens, I don't think that they had a trajectory for it. I think often what happens is they put out the movie and they are like, oh, the kids really liked this part. And so when they do the next movie, they're like, let's do more of that.
They emphasized that X Factor, whatever it was.
Yeah. And so 3, like you said, I think that was like peak, like he was sinister, but he was like clever, and like so it wasn't quite like, it was borderline comedy, but it felt genuine, right?
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh, the kid, that's what they really like, so then they just forced it after that, and then it became something else. And like I was kind of bringing that up with that Blue Beetle movie, because I was like, what's his name, the George Lopez, is that his name?
Yeah, George Lopez.
Like he was genuinely funny. He was like genuinely funny in that movie. Like I was laughing at some of his lines. They were like random, and I was like, "What? Why did he say that?" And I was like, my biggest fear is like when if they make Blue Beetle 2, is that they'll just like throw, like it'll be like 50% of him doing that in the movie, and then it won't feel genuine, and it won't feel like it was in Blue Beetle, where it felt organic and inspired, and so
in like the perfect amount, because he was only in it like 25%. But for a fact, Blue Beetle 2, he's gonna be in it like 45%, and it'll be bigger and funnier.
Yeah, and it'll just be in your face. And I was like, well, no, he wasn't funny because of that. It was funny because it was just the right amount, and he came in with the right lines at the right time that broke the tension and said the right, and he was like kind of saying what we were all thinking at the moment, but like it didn't feel intended at the same time. But anyways, it's not the Blue Beetle podcast, but it's just like they do that in movies all the time, right? And so I think that's what the trajectory of Freddy was.
And if maybe if this show was made like after part 2, he would have been very different.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
I cut you off, Zach. What were you saying?
Oh, I was gonna say to piggyback on Blue Beetle, they need to take a play from the Ant-Man Wasp movie with Luis. They put Luis in just a little bit more than they did in the first one, and that's what worked, and he was so great about it. And Luis is one of the best parts of Ant-Man and Wasp, and I love Ant-Man and Wasp. But anyways.
And that's why 3 was like not as fun, because Luis wasn't there.
Right, exactly, totally. And I think 3 is great. Once it got into like, I'm putting them pepperoni kids on a pizza and eating them, and like, come on, like this is not even imaginative anymore. And then there were moments where they could have, but you guys talking about this made me think one potential idea. I'm wondering, because what is it, like the first 5 episodes are about Freddy Krueger and that connection to Freddy Krueger. I wonder if those are like failed nightmare scripts that they didn't go with a full feature, and they said, oh, we'll do this for a TV series, and then they stretched it out into this thing that became 44 episodes with all these, creep show, monsters, Tales from the Crypt type, Tales from the Dark Side type episodes where, Freddy has no connection, but it's in Springwood still. So there's the connection. Yeah. Right? I'm wondering, I'm just speculating but that to me makes kind of sense, because it's like, well, we just got this shit laying on the ground. Might as well throw it out to people. They're going to eat it, because people did eat it.
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger arguably is the most popular horror icon of all time across the board, from little kids to adults.
Yeah. I don't think you're wrong, but
watching it did make me think of like a Freddy movie to write. So there's that.
There you go.
There you go.
Make it better, Diallo.
It rekindled your love for Freddy.
I
so
was
at
like,
least-
because
at
I
least
was
that's something.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the whole like. 'Cause they never really explain like how. I mean, as far as I know, because I only watched up to really till I think I saw the fourth one and I just didn't like it, so maybe I just blacked out of my mind. But they don't really go into like why he can go into dreams and stuff, and so
They touch on that in Freddy's Dead.
Okay.
You kind of learn that he made this pact with
With the
these
devil or
dream demons or something like that. Yeah,
I thought of something that like is actually that would be kind of cool. The why I'll tell you guys.
Well,
I'll tell you guys
this
after
wasn't
we're
cool.
all-
Like
Yeah.
Freddy's Dead wasn't cool. So anything
Yeah.
you can come up with will be better than that.
It's kind of what I thought of was kind of sinister, like kind of ugly sinister. So, anyways, I'll tell you guys offline.
But even in this, when he gets burned, he's like, I did like what he said. He was like, I'd rather flame out than like fade out or something. I was like, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
But he's like, I'll be back, and I was like, well, but how though?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
You know what I mean?
That's why I started thinking about it. I was like,
Yeah.
like
Just pure willpower, I guess.
yeah.
But I did very much enjoy, revisiting these two shows with you guys and, kind of like putting a button on that question mark and everything of how they held up and that conversation that people tend to have in the online circles that, we swim in. And again, these two shows are always side by side. Rarely does one get discussed without bringing up the other. And of course, that makes sense. They came out at the same time, and they're both, sort of both backed by two major franchises in horror, arguably two of the biggest franchises in horror from the 80s. But I am glad that we did visit this, and, I do think there is a clear winner. But regardless, it's happy Halloween, guys and gals. It's the spooky season and everything, and I love it, and I love doing all these shows with you guys. Diallo, what do you have that we can talk about? What do we, besides Galactica, actually, that keeps that's you guys are still working on that and everything. I think right now you're still going through season 2 right
Yeah,
now, right?
I think by the time this comes out, we'll be like in the back half of season 2. But yeah, we just finished recording this past weekend Resurrection Ship Part 2, which is the finale of the Pegasus arc. Like
Yep.
what I
Love
call
that arc.
Yeah, it's like those 3 episodes are basically a movie, and it's just I call it peak Battlestar Galactica. So yeah, we're in mid season 2 and barreling towards season 3, and that's about it for that. I'm still, I'm promoting Angela in the Dark, the motion comic that we put out. And by the time this comes out, we'll have had a screening actually. So I'm anticipating that will be a very fun, lively affair. And what else? It'll be that'll be at Universal Studios, or that was at. I'm going to say in past tense,
Even though we're before it.
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
recording this
yeah.
mid-September.
yeah, it was at Universal Studios, and we had a lot of studio execs and people. No, I'm just talking now. Whatever. But so there's that, and still kind of working on the first Noel, getting back into putting that out, and then the rest of it is just like trying to figure out what my life's gonna look like for the next 1 month to a year. So
Aren't we all, buddy? Aren't we all?
yeah.
Zach, what's going on at $2 late fee this month?
It is Lost Boys month. We just dropped the Lost Boys proper episode, and then we've got Alan Frog. Jameson Newlander joins us to do a trip down memory lane on Lost Boys. So the day before this episode airs, we just dropped the Lost Boys proper, and Jameson's coming up the week after. So check that out. Lost Boys month on $2 late fee. And man, oh man, we got a lot of big stuff coming up in the next few months. So with Podcasting After Dark and $2 late fee, Diallo, Corey, Paul London, and Dustin and myself, we've got some stuff coming up in a few more months. So stay tuned. If you want to jumpstart on that, go to our Patreons and sign up on our Patreons. Patreon.com, Podcasting After Dark, Patreon.com, $2 late fee, all that good stuff. You get all the info ahead of time before anyone else does.
Darn tootin', baby. And yeah, right now, Zach and I are, man, we are at the very end, pretty much the very end of John Carpenter's filmography. We have, this month, we have another one of his Masters of Horror episode. But then the final month, we will have The Ward. And then we will be on to our new auteur in 2024. Auteur in 2024. Try to say that 10 times fast. But yeah, go check out
Alan Smithy.
There you
go. Be Alan Smithy.
That would actually be an interesting filmography, because then it would be a bunch of different people. But you could probably do one based on everyone who went by Alan Smithy.
Yes.
That would be fun. But
hey, everybody check out their Patreon and see what all the hullabaloo is about.
That is right. Hullabaloo around the world, and a free way to help out every single show. Podcast After Dark, $2 late fee. Galactica, actually, the First Noel Chronicles. Free way to help out every single podcast that you enjoy is leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever allows reviews and or ratings. Zach's making head gestures same as me. So you know what? Happy Halloween, everybody. And as always,
Cut you on the obscure side.
Oh, it's Freddy Krueger.
Oh no!
oh my God, you're going with the Fat Boys.
Be sure to subscribe to Podcasting After Dark and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Support Podcasting After Dark on Patreon. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Podcasting After Dark. And visit us next time for another installment of Podcasting After Dark with Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer.